Chris Wheeler, the Phillies television analyst, long time. His final season in the booth, 2014, which means he called every game that Roy Halladay pitched in a Phillies uniform, and he is kind enough to join us now on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. And Wheels, these are never easy, but shocking, numbing news. Roy Halladay, a very popular figure at 40 years old. I know the news up here, it just rocked us quickly when it started to come out that there was an airplane accident and his name was attached. But when the Phillies sent that press release out, it was shocking. And you were around this guy for his entire career in Philadelphia, and he quickly became one of the most popular Phillies maybe of all time.
Yeah, hi, Mike Pete. It's numbing is a good way to put it, because I'd gotten a few texts late this afternoon from people I knew down in Clearwater, and said that they heard that it was Roy Halladay in that airplane, because they'd heard it was a two-seat airplane and that one person had passed away in that accident. And it turns out that Doc was the only person in the airplane. He loved to fly. That was one of his things when he retired that he really wanted to do, and he spent a lot of time flying. And his life was very different after he retired, because he loosened up a lot and really started to have a lot of fun and started to enjoy himself more. I think he was so competitive when he pitched. There's so many things to remember about him, but I was lucky enough to see Steve Carlton pitch all those games. And when people used to ask me what Roy Halladay is like, I said, well, I don't really know him that well, because he's not the kind of guy you go up to and he'll slap you on the back or talk to you or those kind of things. But he was always very cordial, and he's very competitive. He was like Lefty. I never thought I'd see anybody as competitive as Steve Carlton and prepared as Steve Carlton, and Roy Halladay was like that. Every time he went out there, you thought he had a chance to do something special, and we saw him do two amazing things in one season when he pitched a perfect game and a no-hitter.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that, because you called those games, the perfect game in Miami, the playoff game in Philly against Cincinnati. And what did he bring that the team was maybe missing? Now, they didn't win a World Series with him, but what was the thing that Ruben saw in him that made him so attractive that offseason to go get him, and what did he bring?
Well, his track record with Toronto was just outstanding. We saw him a lot because we were in Clearwater, and I remember we had a little altercation with him in spring training one year when he hit Jim Thome, and Thome said he did it on purpose. Halladay was that kind of guy. I remember Bo was screaming at him, because Bo was, I know you find that shocking, that Bo would be screaming at somebody, and I'll never forget that. This is in spring training when he hit somebody. So the guy had an amazing track record with the Blue Jays, and I'm sure he wanted to pitch there his whole career, but he also knew he was getting near the end, and he wanted to win. And he thought he had a chance to win with us. And, unfortunately, we never got to a World Series with him in the years that his first year was 10, and, our last World Series was 9. So, but the thing about him was his stuff was so nasty. I saw him enough pitching against us in games in interleague play and also in spring training. I always used to watch him and think the man can't throw the ball straight. It moved so much. It was so heavy. His sinker was so heavy. His breaking ball was so sharp. And then when he came over to the Phillies, Rich Doobie taught him a changeup, and that just made him even more devastating. You watch his early games with Toronto, and you don't see him throwing that changeup, that kind of half split that he started to throw when he came over to the Phillies, which turned him into a more devastating pitcher. The guy competed. He would work the umpires after the first inning would end. We always used to laugh and say, watch, he's going to go over there now. And he almost always went over the home plate umpire after the first inning that he pitched, and would make movements with his hands like, all right, is it going to be here all night? Is this what I'm going to get? I'm not going to get this. Everything was very, very detailed with him. He's a very good person, too, and you'll hear a lot about him. He's quiet, but he did a lot of things for his teammates. He did a lot of things for other people. I really think he liked being around kids more than adults. He loved kids. He loved to be around young people and to talk to them and work with them. Adults were kind of an intrusion to him, I think, at one time. That was not what he really enjoyed. He loved his family, and he loved being around kids.
Wheels, what do you remember about when he first got to Philadelphia? And you talk about, by the way, his pitches not being able to go straight. Mike and I were talking about that mental ABCs of pitching, that book that he got. And I know he kept a dog-eared copy of it because Harvey Dorfman really helped like turn around his career from the mental aspect of it. But I read a story when we first heard this news about that he was like snuck off the plane and they told him to stay in the it was like a Beatle was in town when he first got here until they could finally announce it.
Yeah, well, they were trying to keep it under wraps, and that stuff got harder to do, Pete. In the age of social media and all. But the word had been out that we were in it for him, and they were trying to complete it. It had to be a trade, as you know. He wasn't a free agent. And Ruben did a great job with that, and putting the players together to try to finally make it all possible. I would be sitting in the coach's room a lot of nights because I'd be doing the pregame with Charlie, and maybe Charlie wasn't ready, or I'd just be in there talking to the coaches, and Rich Doobie, would be sitting in there waiting for him. And here he comes. Doc would come walking in, and he would have his notes, and Doobs would have his notes, and then it was time for people to take a hike. And let those two sit there and work on stuff. And then Chooch would come in, Carlos Ruiz would come in, because they had such a great relationship. Sometimes they do it in the coach's room. Sometimes they go back out to Doc's locker and do it. But there was always incredible preparation. And he wanted everybody to be that way, and everybody wasn't that way. That was tough for him. That was tough for him when he saw guys who were more carefree and lackadaisical and did it their own way as opposed to the way that he did it. But I always admired many things about him, mostly from watching him from the mound and in the clubhouse. But I always admired that about him, that he really didn't care what his teammates thought about him, other than that he was going to do the best he could, and he hoped that they respected him. And boy, they did respect him, and they they stayed out of his way.
Yeah, and like you said, I mean, he was an intense guy. I'm just looking at this tweet from Cody Ashley, and this is where social media can be good when you get reaction from people right away. And Cody Ashley writes, "I'll never forget how cool I felt on the night of my debut when Doc gave me grief while eating dinner post-game. I decided to try and join in on a conversation. He kindly reminded me that I had 2 ears and 1 mouth." Felt like I was one of the boys right there and then, says Cody Ashley.
Yeah, he always knew where you stood with him. Let me put it that way. He had that look about him. I mean, look at this video that they're showing so much now, and just look at his eyes. I always said with athletes, I could tell a lot about them, how they competed with their eyes. Whether there was a little bit of trepidation going on in there. Whether you were an ultimate type of competitor, what you were feeling at the time. And watch Roy Halladay's eyes, boy. Oof. He was right there with Lefty as far as intensity goes when he was on the mound, and it was every fifth day. And to him, every fifth day was a battle. It was him against those 9 guys that were facing him that night, and he never wanted to come out of a game. He hated not to complete a game. I can still see him when they come out to get him, when Charlie come out to get him, and he did not want to give. He gave the ball. He never would show up as manager or anything like that. But you could see, he would have that reaction on his face, like, "Come on, I can get this guy," or "Let's go," or "Let me stay out here." He always wanted to pitch 9 innings when he was out there.
How would he handle today's world with the analytics and, hey, you're getting me 4 innings and we're going to the bullpen? It doesn't seem that he would this would be the type of game that he would like to be pitching in today.
No, and he wouldn't do that. That wasn't his thing, and it may have been one of the reasons why he blew out. His shoulder went, his back went, because he pitched. You only have so many bullets when you're a major league pitcher. And that guy, boy, oh boy, he exhausted it. It was that first spring training when you could see there was something not right. I can't remember what year it was. It may have been the year
13.
Before he retired. 13, yeah. And everything looked the same, except it wasn't. We use that expression, the way it comes out of a guy's hand. And believe me, when you do it, what we did for so many years, you see it. They come out of his hand a certain way. And you could tell some nights, they're even coming out better or less. But with Doc, it was pretty close. Well, all of a sudden, the mechanics were the same. Everything was the same, and the ball wasn't coming out the same way. It wasn't moving the same way. He didn't have the same sink, and he was getting hit in spring training. Now, you say, well, it's spring training, you don't worry about it. But I remember thinking, gee, I hope this isn't the beginning, of the end. I don't know that he can necessarily become a pitcher, that can get by without that dominating stuff he had and dominating movement that he had. And as it turned out, he couldn't. In that last game, I think he pitched in Miami. He was throwing like 84 or 85, and you pretty much knew, and he knew that was the end.
He did go out gracefully, though. He wasn't one of those guys. When it was over for him, it was over, and he went on to life. And I know one of the things when he got here that was kind of talked about a lot was at spring training, that he would be running around the Carpenter complex there at 5 o'clock in the morning. And, when guys would sign with the team, I know Kendricks, the one year they'd say, well, he'd get up with Halladay. Did you ever see him get up, and see him do his routine at spring training?
No, I wasn't there then. But from what I understand, they gave him his own key so he could get in, so he could get into the clubhouse because he was going to be the first one there. He was beating the trainers. He was beating the coaches, and those guys, believe me, they work really, really, really hard, and they get to spring training games, especially very, very early. They're always there before it's daylight, and doing their thing. So I had heard that about him, that he was going to do that. The Blue Jays basically warned our people, hey, be ready, give him the keys, because he's going to beat everybody there and outwork everybody. And Kendrick was a young player at the time that Doc really liked, and took him under his wing, and Kyle, and he helped Kyle. He helped Kyle mentally, because Doc could really help people mentally, because you mentioned the Dorfman stuff, and he was very into the psychology of it and the cerebral part of pitching, and he tried to help Kyle with that as much as he could. And I'm sure you'll hear from Kyle Kendrick, because he was a big factor in KK's life.
Lastly, Wheels, I know you said he was so intense it was hard to even approach him. A lot of people have said that he was very regimented, but did he loosen up on off days, or was he like that just in season? That's the way he was.
That's the way he was. I'm not saying he wasn't that way with certain people, with his teammates, with people he trusted, but he was. I'll give you one story that I did, and that I had interaction with him. I had several, but this one, you guys, of course, know a guy named Keith Olbermann, right?
Sure.
The broadcaster.
Yep.
Well, Keith and I got to know each other very well over the years, because Keith was a great baseball fan, and he liked me. He liked my work. He used to watch. He had his MLB package. He would watch our games, and he came up one day and told me that. We became real good friends after that. So one day he called me. We were going to be in New York, and he said, "Hey, do you think you could do me a favor?" And I said, "What?" He said, "How well do you know Roy Halladay?" And I said, "What's the favor?" I said, "Because, he's not the easiest guy to approach." He said, "Well, look, I have a collection of baseballs, 3 of them, I think it was, that are signed by Hall of Famers who pitch perfect games. By pitchers who pitch perfect games. That's a pretty cool baseball to have." He said, "Do you think you could get him to sign it, and I'll give him, I won't tell you the number, but I'll give him X amount of dollars, and he can give it to charity, whatever he wants to do with it." So I said, "You know what, I'll give it a shot." So I remember walking up to Doc in the clubhouse one night, and we were on our way to New York, and I told him about it, and I said, Keith Olbermann? He said, "Yeah, I know who he is." And I told him the story, and he said, "Yeah." He said, I'll do that. Why don't you just get them and bring them to me, and then any money that he gives me, I'll give to a charity. I don't remember if he gave it to Phillies charities or not. He may have, or he may have had his own charity. But I remember getting those baseballs signed by Doc, and then giving them to Keith Olbermann. And Roy, I remember saying to him one day, I said, Keith really appreciated what you did, and you're going to get. I think he sent him a check. I forget how the money passed hands, and then Roy gave it to a charity. And he said, "Oh, I had no problem with that." He says, "That's something I really enjoyed doing." And he said, "How about the names on those baseballs that I signed?" So he was very, very impressed by that too. So that's one interaction that I had with him that I'll never forget.
Really good stuff. Chris Wheeler, we appreciate you jumping on in short notice on a sad day here for Phillies fans. 4-0 was the score. It was one of the best events I'd ever been to, watching Roy pitch that game up there. His first ever playoff game after all those years in Toronto. He makes the playoffs and throws a no-hitter, a special guy, Roy Halladay. Wheels, we appreciate the time.
Okay, Mike, Pete, it's my pleasure. Great talking with you.